What's up, you guys? Today we are talking with Seth Swerzik from Hornady. He's a longtime ballistician there, and now he's on the marketing side. I've seen ballisticians been interviewed lots of times on different podcasts and stuff, and I've never heard answers to some of these questions, so let's dive right in. All right, Seth, the question that I get more than anything else by far is, why are there so many new cartridges? And as an example of that, wasn't the 300 Win Mag great? Why do we need a 300 PRC?
Yeah, it's a great question. And 300 Win Mag is a great cartridge when it is hand-loaded because you can take a really, really efficient bullet and seat it, way out of the case, get a nice big powder column of, say Hodgdon Rotumbo or something like that. And you can run that thing and be very accurate with it, especially if you use like a tactical match reamer or something like that, where you get these really tight tolerances in the throat geometry. You get the bullets seated out where you want it. Well, the problem with that is I can do that and you can do that. And there's a bunch of people who can do that, but the hefty majority of people who go to a store and want to buy a factory rifle and factory ammo, and they want to shoot the best bullets out there, and they want to have the best long-range performance possible, and they want to have the most accurate rifle that they can afford. To do that on large scale, you can't use the 300 Win Mag because you have to seat the bullet longer than SAAMI standard. In a lot of cases, you run pressures up higher than SAAMI standard. You use a twist rate that is faster than SAAMI standard. So that cartridge was designed to do something in the 60s, and it did it really well. It pushed light and midweight bullets really fast. And you could, hold hair out to 400, as the old saying goes. But there are modern advancements in technology, whether you buy the $450 rifle or the $4,500 custom rifle, by making these changes that benefit a cartridge design like we do, you make accuracy and consistency is probably the more important one of the two. You make that available for everybody.
Okay, so for the average shooter that maybe doesn't understand all of the technical information and the changes and the things that a new cartridge would bring, what practical on-the-target difference in accuracy would somebody see? What is it gonna do? Is it about variance, that it's easier to find a load that's going to work? What practical difference would they see?
What you'll see is it will be easier to be accurate with on the average. If you bought 100 rifles and 100 different loads of ammo, the average accuracy is going to be significantly better in a 6.5 Creedmoor than it would be on a 6.5 by 55.
And that's something that I can speak to a little bit because I've reviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of different rifles on this channel, and I really struggle when a company sends, a 308, for example. And so when I review a 308, I'll shoot groups like this, and then you finally find the right load, and of course 308 can be extremely accurate, but the variance between loads is huge.
Yeah, exactly right, and a perfect depiction of why a properly designed cartridge lends itself to being successful.
So the elephant in the room, I know Hornady isn't ready to talk about it just yet, but the SAAMI specs for the 7 PRC are out, and it's got people talking. Anything you can tell us on that?
Well, I can't speak to it. I did look at the dimensions on SAAMI.org, and it looks really exciting. As a general rule, Hornady releases all new products at the NASGW show in late October. So I would anticipate to see something then.
So shoulder angle is something I hear about a lot, especially from those who hand load. A lot of people love the Ackley improved cartridges, like the 280 Ackley improved, because they feel like that tighter shoulder angle, that 40-degree angle, makes it so you don't have to trim brass as much. And some people say it's, keeping the flame more in the cartridge so it doesn't wear out your barrel as fast. What kind of factors go into deciding a shoulder angle? Because it seems like most of the new cartridges we've seen from other companies are maybe using a little bit tighter of a shoulder, but the PRC line of cartridges are all built on a 30-degree shoulder angle. So what kind of factors go into that?
Sure. Well, there's definitely some truth, and some of it's theoretical truth. It's hard to prove anything about the shoulder angle and keeping the flame and the temperature concentrated inside the case rather than in the throat. And there is something to be said about chamber alignment when you have that 30, 35, 40 degree angle compared to something like a 20 degree angle or 17 degree angle. But for us, the reason we don't go any shallower than 30 degrees is when we start getting into 35 and 40 degree shoulders, we are dealing with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of rounds produced, right? When you look at our Creedmoors and our PRC line. So over the average of all ammo that we make that has a case with a 30 degree angle, when you go 35, 40 degrees, you have a higher tendency to hunch that shoulder, either when you're making the brass or when you're seating the bullet. And so for us, you get the benefit of that, 35 degree, 40 degree, 30 degree shoulder angle where you're theoretically keeping the temperature concentrated inside the case and you don't have to trim it as often and you get really good chamber alignment, but we are not going to hunch as many shoulders because that angle that brass is stronger in that angle than at 35 or 40 degrees.
Makes sense. The industry has a huge focus on the competition side of things. And one thing I hear very often, especially as new cartridges are announced, is that, hunters probably outnumber competitive shooters, I don't know, maybe 20 to 1?
Many times
probably
over.
a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
But it feels like the industry has a very strong focus toward, bullets and cartridge designs that are for competition. And obviously there's some overlap. A competition-focused cartridge can certainly work as well for hunting. But also, what I hear sometimes from shooters is, I wish that we would think hunting first, where maybe we would go to a short action, which would save some weight and maybe a little barrel length, instead of these competition-focused cartridges and bullet designs. Why do you think there's such a focus on competition in the industry?
Well, I would say, I'll probably speak out of both sides of my mouth on this one, but first and foremost, at least on the Hornady, and I can't speak for anybody else, we have an incredible amount of focus on the hunting crowd. There is no doubt there. We are partnered with many hunters, with TV shows. It's huge, our hunting presence, and we keep that front sight focus because that's really how the company was founded. I think the reason you see Hornady and many other companies have a strong hand in the competition side is competitively there is a standard metric to compare performance. When you start looking at PRS type competitions, NRL hunter competitions, there is a prescribed set of rules to compare people and their performance. And so when someone is really good at a certain sport, you can document it by saying, here's the criteria that they met, where if you were just, randomly picking random hunters, the fact that somebody killed an animal is not necessarily that good of criteria to start sifting through, because, you get into a bunch of other things where competitively, you have a very strict and set of standards to compare people.
Okay, so you have one shot to hit a 400-yard target or your family dies a horrible death. What cartridge would you pick?
400 yards, horrible death. I think, I think pretty easily I would go, depending on the size of the target. I guess if it was a small target, I'd go 6mm Creedmoor.
Awesome. What makes you pick that? You
got to mess up pretty bad to miss at 400 with a 6 Creedmoor, as far as you get the elevation forgiveness because it's going really fast. 108 grain bullet obviously bucks the wind really, really well. And I think that would give you the ability to mess up the most and still hit what you were aiming at that range.
Okay, so now what if the target's an elk?
No questions asked. 300 PRC for any range of elk hunting. That is the juggernaut. No questions asked.
So let's talk bullet designs. If you were to have one hunting bullet to choose the rest of your life, what bullet would you pick?
Well, that's pretty easy one. It would be the ELDX. The ELDX is held to the same accuracy standard as our ELD match bullets. So they shoot just remarkably well for accuracy. And then from the terminal performance side of things, they do an incredible job. It's really hard to do all things great, but they do all things well. And they can take close range impacts, and they will expand down to 1,600 feet per second. So if you have to airmail one out there on an extended range shot, ELDX.
So you obviously have a lot of different bullets, that hunters may be interested in, Interlock SST, CX, which is the new GMX.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through some of the use cases where you may want to choose each of those.
Sure. Well, starting with the Interlock and the SST, those bullets are very much the same construction in that they have a tapered jacket with what we call an interlock ring, which is a ring inside the bullet that the copper jacket is barbed on the inside, so the lead is grabbed by that ring, so it holds the jacket and core together. The Interlock and the SST, very similar bullets. The SST obviously has a polymer tip, so you get a little bit more dramatic expansion. The best use case for an Interlock or an SST bullet is medium-sized game, maybe elk-sized game with the appropriate bullet weight at traditional distances. That's where you would choose an Interlock or an SST. Traditional range, medium to large game, with again given the appropriate bullet weight and diameter. Moving up from there, you have the ELDX, which we talked about, which is kind of our do-all bullet. The big one now is the CX bullet, and the CX, like you mentioned, is the newer version, if you will, of the GMX bullet. So it's monolithic, and the reason to choose a monolithic bullet has nothing to do with the fact that it's lead-free. It has everything to do with the fact that these things hit like a hammer. If you are a shoulder blade shooter, if a lot of your shots are close range, if you have to, if you're hunting in very densely wooded areas and things are going to happen right up in front of you, that CX bullet will absolutely penetrate. In a lot of cases, it'll go through 2 shoulder blades and give you an exit wound. I mean, this thing just penetrates like crazy. Now with the new CX, you do get some drag benefits that help it perform at a moderate range and a what I'm going to call a medium distant range. It's not a long range type bullet per se, but you do get expansion just about 150 to maybe 200 yards further than you would have with a traditional GMX. So if you're looking for that deep penetration, maybe you're hunting in a lead restricted area, that CX bullet is really, really a hammer when it hits. Those monolithic bullets really penetrate well, and they've got a good reputation for that, and it's well deserved. Then kind of in the middle there is a interbond bullet, which we don't make a lot of anymore. Bonded bullets solved a problem kind of early on before before the industry really had a good handle on high performance monolithic bullets. And that is a lead core bullet that uses a proprietary heating process to essentially weld the jacket to the core. Those things retain a lot of weight. They do about a 90% weight retention. So that's an option for people out there. Again, traditional range, 400 yards and in, maybe a little bit higher weight retention than a Interlock or an SST.
What should hand loaders do when you're trying to work with a shorter barrel? We take something like a 7 mag, for example, that's usually in a 24 or 26 inch barrel, but now barrels are getting shorter and shorter. What should a hand loader do as they're loading a cartridge to work better in a shorter barrel?
Sure.
Faster powder, slower powder, what can they do?
I think, first off, I'm in that camp. Every barrel I've built, or I haven't built barrels, every rifle I've built, my barrels get shorter and shorter and shorter because I've run suppressed, and it's just the way to do it. I would say from the hand loading side, the best thing you could do is go with a slightly faster burning propellant. Not crazy fast, but if you look at the list of useful powders, generally the faster propellants with a lower charge weight, again, you're going to sacrifice velocity, will lend itself to being more forgivingly accurate because you have a better chance of those propellants being burned up while the bullet's still in the barrel, and then you won't have that ejecta chasing the bullet out of the muzzle and kicking the base of the bullet because that gas is expanding and traveling faster than the bullet, so it's going to encompass the bullet, and you want to try to get that powder charge burned up if you can. So going faster generally will help. And then as a general rule, we've seen that lower charge weights tend to produce better accuracy on the average. Not always, but given the same powder, a lower charge weight usually shoots more consistently accurate than a higher charge weight. So go faster on the propellant. Another thing that a hand loader should do running a short barrel is be mindful of your velocity loss when you're working up your powder charge, because velocity is married to pressure. You do not get free velocity. And if you're getting velocity that most people get from a 24-inch barrel and you're in a 20, that is not free, and you are very likely exceeding normal operating pressures. And I see that a lot on the hand loading side, and a lot of people running custom actions don't see the traditional signs of pressure. Not to, go super tangentially to the conversation, but that's just something to be mindful of. Velocity is not free, and if you're in a short barrel, you're going to lose about 25 to 30 feet per second per inch of barrel. And if you're seeing velocity that's normally seen out of a longer barrel, something might be slightly overpressure.
What makes a bullet design more forgiving? I don't mean to throw out a different manufacturer's bullet as a bad example, but I honestly just couldn't think of a Hornady one that I felt. But I really like the Terminal Ascent bullet from Federal. It's a great bullet, but it is tougher to work with to get accuracy. So what in a bullet design makes it more or less forgiving?
Well, one thing that can make a bullet easier to shoot accurately is a long bearing surface. So think of that as like the wheelbase of a car, right? So if you've got really long bearing surface, you've got this really long wheelbase, and a longer bearing surface bullet tends to be more accurate over the average production life of that bullet, let's say. It will be easier to get to shoot because there's more surface area contacted. And that wheelbase, for whatever reason, just seems to make that more consistent. So a longer bearing surface helps. If you run something with a dramatically secant ogive and then couple that with a really short bearing surface, that's going to lend itself to being picky and harder to get to shoot because you have that shorter wheelbase and you've got a really, really long bullet. So that long bullet's got leverage, as it's engraving in the rifling. And then if the wheelbase is really short, it's just going to be, one, it's going to be more jump sensitive, how far it jumps into the rifling. And two, it's just going to be generally less accurate because of the bearing surface. Another thing you can do for accuracy is boat tail. The length and the angle of a bullet's boat tail is not by luck and by golly. I mean, at least for us anyway. We if a bullet has a boat tail, like our ELDX, ELD Match, our A-tip bullets, that boat tail angle and length has been tested and selected for a very specific purpose. And in some cases, it's because if we went with a different angle or length, they don't shoot quite as well over the average. So, and again, I keep saying over the average because we're not making 20,000 bullets. We're making a bullet a second on however many machines we have. It has to be accurate over the entire production life. So those are some things. Then you get into material. Monolithic bullets tend to be tougher to get to shoot accurately. Not always, but again, generally, that material is harder to engrave into the rifling. And that can distort that bullet. Again, if not everything's perfect with throat diameter and freebore length and that kind of stuff, that bullet wants to distort a little bit as it enters the rifling because that material's a lot tougher than copper and lead. So monolithic bullets are generally a little tougher to get to shoot. Likewise, if you bond a bullet, typically that uses a heating process, and that softens things. Heat softens metal, and a softer bullet can sometimes be, I know I just said a monolithic bullet is harder, but on the opposite side of that, if you make a bullet too soft, it'll fight you as well for accuracy. So there's a bunch of different things that I just spit out there, but generally they all kind of work hand in hand, and you can select different attributes for different purposes and tweak something to make it work.
So is there a standard that Hornady uses with each of your bullets of how accurate it needs to be?
Yeah, for sure. A-tip bullets have their specific accuracy spec. ELD Match, ELDX, Botail Hollow Points, those general match bullets, they have a specific accuracy spec. And the hunting bullets, SST, Interlock, stuff like that, VMAXs, have an accuracy spec. And it's also done by caliber. And it's done at different ranges. That's one of the bigger separators is, when we shoot a 10-shot group at 200 versus 100, we're holding it to a tight standard at 200 yards. And then there's different specs for if it starts the run and every interval, because we shoot it at intervals. If we're running 100,000 bullets, you'll shoot it when it starts. You'll get it to shoot accurately enough to pass. And then every 10,000 bullets or 15,000 bullets, you shoot it again for accuracy. And you do that throughout the entire production. And then you shoot it at the end of the run. So there's different specs for different things, and a lot of it is bullet class, hunting, match, that kind of thing, and then diameter related. Our 22 cal 55 grain VMAX. I don't know what the spec is offhand, but I want to say it's 350, maybe 3/10 of an inch at 100 yards, which is just a little wad of a 22 cal, and that's the worst we'll let them shoot. Typically they shoot better than that. Whereas the A-tip, we're shooting 10-shot groups at 200, and that's sub half minute, and usually they'll run in the 6 to 7/10 range for a 10-shot string at 200, which is.
Well, cool. It was good talking with you, Seth. I do want to mention the Hornady podcast that I've been listening to. It's been an awesome show.
I appreciate it. That's been a fun endeavor. We're trying to figure out what works and what people like. And so if there's listeners out there on your platform that do listen to the Hornady podcast, please shoot us an email with, what you want to hear, what you like, what you don't like, because we're still very new to this, and we're glad you're enjoying it. We hope everybody's enjoying it, but we want to put content out there that people actually want to hear, and we want stuff to put out there that people like to learn about, and ballistics is one of those things, and hopefully we can do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to stop my recording here.